Hello, welcome. If you are just tuning in to this video, then maybe it's your first time here. Thank you so much for stopping by. This video is a first in a series that I call Steam Quest. The point of this show is to showcase unknown, overlooked, or underrated indie games on the Steam market that I think deserve some attention. During the Steam Summer Sale, I spent a long time going down specific categories and specific genres, just scrolling endlessly for what felt like hours. And I realized that there are a lot of interesting Steam games that just don't get coverage from major journalists or gaming sites in general. These are games that we're talking are pushed towards the bottom of the barrel as the cream of the crop rises. This is what's left underneath. And I really think that there's a lot of interesting and really important games in the bottom. So let's go ahead and dive into one of the games that is slowly, or quickly I should say, rising to the top, and that is Halls of Torment. If you're a fan of Asmongold or Vampire Survivor style games in general, then you probably already know about this game, in which case just go and enjoy playing it. You obviously already have it because it is the best Survivors game, in my personal opinion, that has come out, bar none. Now, I know that's a lofty claim, but as somebody who has easily 50 to 60 hours in Vampire Survivors, it is no small task to outdo what I consider to be a modern masterpiece. Now, first things first, how much is this game going to run you? How much space does it take up? And overall, what is this game? So essentially, Halls of Torment is a Vampire Survivor style game with a Diablo art style and a Diablo style combat system, more akin to older Diablos such as 1 and 2. The game is going to run you $4.99 on Steam, but there is a free demo for the game that actually takes your save progress and will actually transfer it over when you're ready to buy the actual game. The game takes up a total of 4 gigabytes of space on your hard drive. It is Steam Deck verified, and it is technically in early access. However, we will get to that specifically later because I actually think that this game doesn't feel like an early access game. With over about 8,000 reviews on Steam, it sits at an overwhelmingly positive review score on the Steam page. So you know that a lot of people have clearly enjoyed this. For my achievement hunters out there, the game currently has 201 achievements ready for you to complete. In terms of how fast and viable they are to get, I have about 9 hours of playtime and currently am sitting at about 73 achievements. Enough of going over the Steam page for the game, let's go ahead and get into what this game is. As I mentioned, obviously, a Survivors-like game, and this game is a blend of old school Diablo combat with the mechanics of a Survivors game. Survivors-like, I'm not really sure what we're calling them yet, but I'm gonna go with Survivors-like. The graphics, the presentation, the music, the whatever story there may be, I'm not actually sure about that, but the NPCs, which we will get into, are all inspired heavily by old school Diablo, as well as old CRPGs like Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment. The reason I chose to cover Halls of Torment is because I think Halls of Torment does progression and leveling up in a much different and more unique way than Vampire Survivors, and also offers a little bit more mechanically in the Survivors-like genre. I would argue that this game has more depth and complexity when it comes to your leveling up and what happens when you level up and the things that you can actually do in this game. If you're familiar with Vampire Survivors, you know that the only thing that you can do is move and all of your attacks auto-attack. Every time you level up, you get to choose a pickup or a level up for one of your pickups, and essentially that continues to level you up through your 30-minute run. Now, Vampire Survivors, for the most part, has your pickups, and then they have the pickups that combine together to evolve that pickup, ultimately making you stronger in the process and very quickly becoming a bullet hell game by just shattering every single enemy in your path. The complexity from the game really comes through combining different items to understand how they work, and then also moving your character so that they stay out of the line of fire. Halls of Torment decides to actually put control into your hands and allows you to attack or auto-attack at your choosing. So you can actually aim and attack at your own pace. This seemingly simple control option actually offers a lot of depth. I actually think that there are more enemies in this game than Vampire Survivors, specifically because as you are trying to walk around and avoid, I feel the camera is pulled back just a little bit more than Vampire Survivors, offering you a bigger view of the battlefield and ultimately sending in more and more armies of the undead. As you get closer to the end of the run, you're going to be mowing down tons of demons and skeletons and guards of all sorts of varieties, and you're going to be seeing the numbers popping, and you're going to feel like you're getting that Diablo rush that a lot of action RPGs, isometric dungeon crawlers offer you, because there's just so many enemies, and it actually, I would say there's way more enemies in this than even a Diablo game. Less emphasis on loot, but way more emphasis on the amount of enemies and the amount of damage you can do to all of those enemies. Now, in any traditional Survivors like, every time you level up, you get to increase a skill of yours, or add a skill. Where I think Halls of Torment really shakes things up is not only do you get to keep adding on to your base skills, your modifiers, much like you would in a normal RPG, but there are bosses that come through every few minutes that will offer you upon death a item or skill of some kind that will basically alter you and give you some kind of area of effect attack. This makes going after bosses and sub-bosses imperative to your playthroughs. What I like is that they treat your skills more as a normal RPG with like stats, whereas every time you basically raise an element of your own character, that's considered your level up, and every time you go after a boss or after a mini boss, that is going to be your actual item that you get. Already the game feels as if it's got a little bit more complexity just in the fact that you can aim and you can attack on your own accord, and I think this adds a lot of fun and a lot of skill that a lot of games in this genre really forget about. By giving control back to the player, you get a lot of elements of dynamic gameplay just because you get the choice. The typical level ups that you'll get as far as stats go will be like your area of effect for your attack speed, your attack range, the duration of certain attacks, and ultimately every level up feels absolutely necessary to completing each run. Now, if that weren't already a ton of content, the game also has a ton of characters to choose from. Now, this kind of surprised me. I didn't expect nearly as many characters to be able to choose from, but having played for 9 hours, I currently have 5 different classes unlocked, and each one plays wildly different than the next. You've got your standard swordsman, which is going to be a simple attack. You have to be somewhat close to your enemies unless you can get a decent enough range when you're leveling up. You've got a archer that is going to function exactly how you would think. They're a long range playthrough. They kind of feel more like a glass cannon. Then you have some really interesting types like shield maiden and exterminator. The Exterminator has a flamethrower that works way more on range and burning damage, and then the Shield Maiden is sort of a mix between a swordsman and going for a more area of effect attack, but I'm still trying to get the hang of the Shield Maiden. Needless to say, each playthrough feels wildly different because of these classes, and each time allows you to experiment with what is the best leveling up path for them. I'm still curious to see how many classes are actually in the game, because I feel like as I unlock new stages and as I do specific things in each run through, it seems that you can continue unlocking classes as the game goes on. For a game that's in early access, the fact that I feel that there is just way more content in this game is super impressive. I've unlocked a total of 3 stages, each one feeling very distinct and different from the other. Also, each stage tends to have its own quests that you're supposed to do during each run through, which will unlock different elements in the game. A perfect example is there's an NPC in one of the first stages that when you talk to, you actually save and rescue them by finding a key, unlocking them from a cage, and when they come back, they actually offer you the ability to get gear. Now, this completely shakes up what a Survivors like typically does. The gear in this game kind of adds that Diablo style loot that you'd expect. This gear offers a lot of different elements of buffs and chances to up your attack, your critical attack, your speed, and ultimately provides a lot of depth when combining different items for loot. Now, to make sure you're not leveling up and getting too much gear right away, the game actually, as you find and defeat bosses, you will actually get a chest with an item. Now, what you're supposed to do with this item is take it to a well, put it in the well, and then retrieve it. And then when you get back to your base, you can talk to the guy at the well, the NPC that you rescued from earlier, and you can actually now use that piece of gear in new runs. And the game totally intends on you doing this because they even offer you the option to have different loadouts on a save, so that when you want to switch to a different loadout, you can easily decide what type of build you'd want to have ready to go, and you can just flip to it immediately. It's those little touches that I just really appreciate when a game respects your time, it knows what you're planning on doing, and it sort of reads the player's mind. If that weren't enough, I actually want to talk about the bosses for a split second, and that's because the bosses actually have their own attack patterns, and they're all very unique and interesting. Obviously, they're very similar styles to Diablo enemies and bosses, but that's kind of the charm of the game, and what's really cool is each boss has its own attack pattern, each boss has its own area of effects that it will throw attacks your way, and depending on whether you're fighting a boss or a sub-boss, you'll either get a skill that allows that area of effect attack like I mentioned earlier, or you'll get a chest alongside of a piece of gear, and a ton of experience to go alongside it to make sure that you get to level up. These elements of the game just give so much depth and variety, and it makes me feel like I have a long way to go before I see everything this game has to offer. The fact that I'm about close to 10 hours in and this is just early access is super impressive to me, especially too when you consider that the asking price for this game is only $5. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that this game also has progression outside of the main runs, and that is of course in the same way that Survivors offers you gold to be able to upgrade those skills as you go through. You can also of course do that in this game as well, so that you can actually increase those skills like your area of attack, your speed, your attack speed, as well as your base health and your crit damage. The way that this game takes a lot of those Dungeons and Dragons RPG stats and mixes them with that Diablo and Survivors gameplay, it really creates just this incredible experience that I think is honestly one of the most fun games I've played in a long time. Now, just to be clear, my intention going forward with SteamQuest is to talk about games that are less known. However, because this game is still so early access and still so new, I figured it would be a worthwhile game to put on this video as one of the first, just so that you get to experience this game yourself. I would expect this game to come to consoles at some point. However, I don't know if there is a plan for it at the moment. However, this game does run super great on a controller, so I could totally see it happening soon. I'll also mention this game runs impeccably on the Steam Deck. I spent a good few hours of my playtime playing on the deck, and thankfully I got about 5 hours of gameplay on it. It's great in short bursts, it's great in long sessions, and ultimately Halls of Torment is something that you should really be looking at when it comes to games. It's games like Halls of Torment that just show how far games have come, and that AAA developers, although they're valuable, they are not the lifeblood of the video game industry. Halls of Torment is what happens when a passionate developer takes content that they've loved over several years, packs it into an incredible content-filled game, and then sells it to you for only $5. For the price of a Starbucks, I will have endless hours of content simply because somebody cared enough to do this. And that is the point of SteamQuest. To bring you games like this so that you can have endless hours of fun yourself. Now I want to hear from you. Have you played Halls of Torment? Does the game look good? What are your thoughts on it? I'd just love to know what you think, so make sure to comment below. Also, if you like this format in SteamQuest, please also leave feedback on that. I'd love to know what you think of this format and this style of framing a video around a single game that I've scoured the internet for. If you have a game that you think I should cover on SteamQuest, be sure to comment and leave it below. I'll make sure that if I have the ability and the funds, I will make sure to take a look at it, especially if it's something that's more underrated or overlooked. With all that being said, take care everybody, and I hope you have a great one. Hopefully, I'll see you next time.